The hospital entrance was crowded with people rushing through the bright afternoon, but none of them noticed the young man kneeling on the pavement with tears streaming down his face. His name was Elias Mercer, and in his trembling hands he held the last $23 he had in the world. Behind the glass doors, his mother was fighting for her life, while the hospital demanded a payment he could never afford. Elias had spent the entire morning calling relatives, neighbors, old friends, and anyone who might possibly help. Every answer had been the same: nobody had enough money. Now, with the clock moving forward and his mother's condition becoming more serious, Elias had only one thing left to offer: a desperate promise that he would somehow repay every penny if the doctor would simply save her. If you believe that kindness can create second chances when people have nothing left, please take a moment to like, comment, share this story, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. Elias had never imagined his life would come down to begging outside a hospital. At 32, he had spent most of his adult life working wherever someone would hire him. He repaired broken appliances, carried furniture, painted houses, delivered packages, and sometimes worked 14-hour days without complaining. His mother, Maribel Mercer, had raised him alone after his father disappeared when Elias was a child. She had worked as a school cafeteria assistant for decades, saving every small amount she could so Elias could have shoes, books, and a chance at a better future. She never asked him for anything except that he keep moving forward whenever life became difficult. But life had become difficult in a way neither of them expected. 3 months earlier, Maribel had collapsed while preparing breakfast. Doctors discovered a serious heart condition that required urgent treatment. The procedure was expensive, and although the hospital had tried to help them apply for assistance, there was still a large amount that Elias needed to cover. He sold his old pickup truck, emptied his savings, sold his tools, and borrowed small amounts from people who were already struggling themselves. By the time Maribel was admitted for her procedure, Elias had nothing left. That morning, sunlight poured through the hospital windows as Elias sat beside his mother's bed. Maribel looked tired but peaceful, her silver hair neatly combed and her thin hands resting beneath the blanket. She tried to smile whenever she saw him, because she could always tell when he was frightened. Elias kept pretending everything was under control, even though his stomach felt like it had been tied into a knot. He told her that everything would be fine, that the doctors knew what they were doing, and that he would be waiting right outside. When the medical team came to take Maribel toward the treatment area, Elias followed until a nurse gently stopped him. A few minutes later, a doctor named Dr. Celeste Rowan approached him with a serious expression. She explained that the procedure needed to begin immediately, but the hospital's financial department had not received the required authorization. Elias understood what that meant. He pulled out his wallet and counted the money in front of her. $23 and some loose change. It looked painfully small against the enormous bill sitting on the desk. Elias begged her not to let money decide whether his mother lived. He explained everything he had sold, everything he had borrowed, and every job he had worked. His voice shook as he promised that he would work every day for the rest of his life if necessary. Dr. Rowan could see the desperation in his face, but she was bound by hospital procedures. She told him she would personally contact the administration again and do everything she could within the rules. Elias walked outside because he could no longer breathe inside the building. The afternoon air was warm, cars moved steadily along the street, and people passed the hospital carrying coffee cups and shopping bags, unaware that his entire world was collapsing. He looked toward the sky and whispered a prayer for his mother. Then he noticed a black luxury car stopping near the entrance. At first, Elias paid no attention. Expensive cars came to hospitals all the time. But the vehicle stopped directly in front of the emergency entrance. A chauffeur stepped out and opened the rear door. A tall man in an immaculate dark blue suit slowly stepped onto the pavement. He was in his early 50s, with silver beginning to show at his temples and an expression that suggested he was accustomed to people moving aside when he entered a room. His name was Gideon Vale, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. Elias recognized him immediately from business magazines and television interviews. Gideon had built a massive technology company from a small workshop and was known for donating millions to hospitals, universities, and children's charities. But Elias had never expected a man like that to walk out of a car only a few feet away from him. Gideon looked toward the hospital entrance, then noticed Elias sitting on the ground. Their eyes met. Instead of walking past, Gideon stopped. Elias quickly stood up, embarrassed by his appearance. His clothes were worn, his hands were dirty from years of manual work, and his face was marked by exhaustion. Gideon asked what had happened. Elias hesitated. He didn't want to sound like someone trying to take advantage of a wealthy stranger. But then he looked through the glass doors and remembered his mother. He told Gideon the truth. His mother was inside. She needed urgent treatment. He had sold everything he owned. He had $23 left. The hospital was waiting for financial authorization, and he was terrified that he would lose the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for him. Gideon listened without interrupting. Then something changed in his expression. He asked Elias for his mother's name. When Elias answered, Gideon became completely still. Maribel Mercer. The name seemed to awaken a memory buried deep inside him. Gideon asked Elias what his mother did before retirement. Elias explained that she had worked in a school cafeteria for many years. Gideon asked which school. Elias answered. For several seconds, Gideon stared at the hospital doors. Then he quietly told Elias that his mother had once saved his life. Elias was confused. 27 years earlier, before Gideon became wealthy, he had been a struggling young man living in the same neighborhood as Maribel. He had been working 2 jobs while trying to keep his small business alive. One winter afternoon, he had collapsed from exhaustion outside a school where Maribel worked. While everyone else walked past him, Maribel had brought him inside, given him food, called for help, and quietly paid for his medicine. But she had done something even more important. Before he left, Maribel had told him never to let poverty convince him that he was worthless. Those words had stayed with Gideon for decades. He had tried to find her many times, but she had moved away, and he eventually lost contact with her. Now, after nearly 3 decades, the woman who had helped him when he had nothing was lying inside a hospital, and her son was kneeling outside with $23. Gideon immediately walked into the hospital beside Elias. Dr. Rowan was reviewing Maribel's file when Gideon entered. She recognized him instantly. Gideon calmly explained his connection to Maribel and asked the hospital administration to proceed with the treatment without delay. He personally guaranteed every necessary expense. But Elias still looked worried. He told Gideon that he didn't want charity. Gideon looked directly at him and explained that this wasn't charity. He was simply returning something that had been given to him years ago when he had nothing. The hospital team moved quickly. Maribel was taken for treatment, and Elias sat in the waiting room with Gideon. For the first time that day, Elias wasn't alone. Hours seemed to pass even though only minutes had gone by. Elias repeatedly thanked Gideon, but Gideon kept telling him that gratitude wasn't necessary. Instead, he asked Elias about his work. Elias admitted that he had lost his job after missing too many days to care for his mother. He had planned to find another one after her treatment, but he didn't know where he would start. Gideon listened carefully. Then he asked Elias what he was actually good at. Elias mentioned repairing machines and electrical equipment. He explained that he had always enjoyed fixing things but had never been able to afford formal training. Gideon smiled. His company had a maintenance division that needed skilled workers. He offered Elias an entry-level position with paid training, but he made one thing clear: Elias would earn the opportunity rather than receive it as a favor. Elias couldn't believe what he was hearing. The door to the treatment area finally opened. Dr. Rowan stepped into the waiting room. She smiled. Maribel was stable, and the procedure had gone well. Elias covered his face with both hands and cried, not from fear this time, but from relief. When he entered his mother's room later that afternoon, Maribel slowly opened her eyes. She saw Elias standing beside her bed, and then she noticed Gideon behind him. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then Gideon quietly introduced himself. Maribel stared at his face for several seconds before remembering the exhausted young man she had helped decades earlier. A weak smile appeared on her face. She couldn't believe that the frightened young man she once helped had become the wealthy businessman standing beside her bed. Gideon told her that he had never forgotten what she had done. Maribel simply squeezed his hand and told him that she hadn't done anything extraordinary. She had only helped someone who needed help. Gideon smiled and told her that sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the most important moment in another person's life. Months later, Maribel recovered enough to return home. Elias began working at Gideon's company, learning new skills and rebuilding his life. He worked hard, not because he owed Gideon anything, but because someone had finally given him the chance to believe in himself again. And something beautiful happened. Elias began setting aside a small amount from every paycheck. He used it to help people in his neighborhood who were facing difficult times. Sometimes it was groceries. Sometimes it was a repair bill. Sometimes it was simply helping someone find temporary work. Whenever someone asked why he did it, Elias remembered the afternoon when he had been sitting outside the hospital with $23 in his pocket. He remembered the billionaire stepping out of the car. And most importantly, he remembered that Gideon hadn't only paid a hospital bill. He had reminded Elias that kindness could travel through generations. Years later, Gideon attended a small community event where Elias was recognized for helping struggling families. Maribel sat proudly in the front row. When Elias accepted the award, he didn't talk about money or success. He talked about his mother. He said that sometimes people think they need wealth before they can change someone's life, but kindness doesn't begin with money. It begins when someone decides that another person's pain matters. That afternoon, Maribel smiled from her chair, and Gideon quietly applauded. The billionaire had walked out of a luxury car expecting an ordinary hospital visit. Instead, he found the woman who had changed his life before he ever became rich, and discovered that the greatest fortune he had ever received was not money at all. It was kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that one good deed can change a life, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0 for more emotional stories about hope, courage, and second chances. Before the story ends, comment, "Kindness comes back," if you believe that every good deed, no matter how small, can someday make a difference. Because sometimes, the person you help today may be the very person who helps you tomorrow, and sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't the money someone gives you, but the hope they give you when you have nothing left.